Hello and welcome to this long overdue episode of the Rogues Gallery, and I must start by apologising for taking so long in bringing you this video. Much to my surprise, the Rogues Gallery videos have actually become my most requested uploads, which does surprise me as they do not receive the highest views on the channel. Nevertheless, ask and you shall eventually receive, so I hope I can make it up to you with this special exhibition of the Punisher's most infamous villains. So let's waste no time and dive straight in with Barracuda. This colossal ex-marine turned gangster is just as violent as the Punisher himself. He would subsequently align himself with Harry Ebbing, a corrupt and violent corporate CEO who would pay Barracuda to assassinate the Punisher. The two would meet in a bloody encounter where Barracuda would lose his eye and fingers. Later, Barracuda would meet his own violent end at the hands of the Punisher after kidnapping Castle's daughter and holding her hostage. Big mistake. As shocking as this sounds, Barracuda is not the only villain who was brave enough to mess with Castle's family. Lady Gorgon was also guilty of such an act. Tanya Adrian was an assassin in the hand under the name of Lady Gorgon and was sent to kill the Punisher by Jigsaw. After initially failing, Gorgon would try to regain her honour by assassinating the Punisher, who had been turned into Frankencastle. After failing yet again, Gorgon retreated to Japan and tried fighting Punisher using a magical Japanese sword. Later, Gorgon would join forces with Jigsaw and Rampage to kill the Punisher and even disguised herself as Punisher's dead wife, Maria Castle. Moving from one lethal lady to the next, we take a closer look at Ma Nucci. The matriarch of the notorious Nucci crime syndicate, Ma came into conflict with the Punisher when he tried to eliminate her entire family. A series of unsuccessful attempts on the Punisher's life ended when he threw her into the inferno that was her burning home. Another villain who played with fire and got burned was Cooley. This former IRA soldier and terrorist ran an active service unit. Finn's upper face would become severely disfigured after a bomb he was trying to rig exploded prematurely. This would force him to wear a plastic mask that kept his flesh on his ruined face from falling off. Finn's terrorist acts would see him come into conflict with the Punisher. In fact, the Punisher does seem to attract adversaries from a military background, as the following antagonists will reveal. Burt Kenyon was the Vietnam veteran who served in the same company as Frank Castle, subsequently saving his life in the war. Burt Kenyon was hired by Marja, an international crime syndicate, to act as their version of the Punisher. It was here where he claimed the alias Hitman. After Frank Castle became mentally unstable, Microchip recruited former Navy SEAL Carlos Cruz to become the new Punisher. With his superior armoured suit and more forgiving sanctions, Cruz would excel in his new role until he was killed by Stone Cold, who also assassinated Microchip. Castle would eventually avenge Cruz, who initially thought to be Microchip's killer. Speaking of Microchip, what better time to introduce the scourge of the underworld's former assistant. Weapons engineer Libus Lieberman became Frank Castle's sidekick, putting his skills to work building the Punisher's arsenal. Calling himself Microchip, he became a close friend and confidant of Castle. However, this partnership made him the target of the Punisher's enemies, including the Kingpin, who kidnapped him before cutting off his finger and posting it to Frank Castle. Upon being killed on one of the Punisher's missions, Microchip would be resurrected before working with a host of the Punisher's enemies against his former friend. Aside from ex-military antagonists, the Punisher has clashed with some rogues of a more religious background. This former priest turned government operative was outfitted with bionic arms that can morph into various firearms. With his own built-in munitions, Carl Bernbank, aka Bushwhacker, would be called upon by various crime bosses to terminate the Punisher. Much like a Punisher figure himself, Father Redondo would tear his sinful victims to pieces with an axe after hearing their guilty confessions. Calling himself the Holy, Redondo came to idolize the Punisher, who he felt had a similar modus operandi. He would later join the vigilante squad with Mr. Payback and Elite. Together, they tried to convince the Punisher to lead them, but he thought it would be a better idea to kill the trio instead. Our next villain is less about heaven and more about hell, because he is the one known as Olivier. Traitorous Hell Lord Olivier was banished to Earth as a human for conspiring against the other demons. It was here that he was reborn as Frank Costa, head of the Costa crime family. Soon after, Costa would remember his dark origins and desire for vengeance against the Lords of Hell. He would use his powers to locate Frank Castle, an American soldier in the Vietnam War, whose victims from that moment on would travel to a portion of hell where Olivier's army could amass. To increase his numbers further, he had Castle's family murdered by the mob, as this would lead him to seek vengeance as the Punisher. Years later, when Olivier revealed this plan, Castle would feed Olivier to a giant extra-dimensional beast when he caused a tear in the universe. Another villain who came into existence through a demon encounter was the Hood. After being attacked by a cloaked demon, Parker Robbins would come into possession of a red cloak and boots, which granted him superhuman capabilities. When the Punisher tried to assassinate Norman Osborn, he would seek revenge by asking the Hood to hunt the vigilante down. Robbins would use the powers of the Dormammu to resurrect the villains that were killed by Punisher to form a squad that would help him eliminate Castle. Now we transition across to some villains who were perhaps more closely associated with other comic book heroes, such as the Kingpin. Although more of a Daredevil and Spider-Man villain, Kingpin has clashed with the Punisher. The infamous Kingpin of crime rules the East Coast underworld with an iron fist and zero tolerance of failure. This position would see him encounter the Punisher, who would leave the villain with a bullet in the back of his head. More commonly an enemy of Daredevil, Bullseye has also clashed with the Punisher. This assassin would be hired for his services by New York crime lord the Kingpin, but was eventually replaced by Elektra, who he would kill in order to reclaim his position. Rather appropriately, we journey through the Rogues Gallery to meet a man who ran an art gallery for a more elite group of clientele. The Elite was a fascist and racist vigilante who killed criminals who quote-unquote lowered the prestige of his upper-class neighbourhood. Furthermore, this well-spoken gent also ran an art gallery with his typical nuclear family. Elite subsequently joined forces with Mr. Payback and the Holy to form the Vigilante Squad in an attempt to exterminate all of New York City's criminals. Castle deemed the Elite as nothing more than a Nazi before gunning him down in front of the Vigilante Squad. As dangerous as the aforementioned villains have been, our next rogue is up there with the deadliest, as he actually managed to kill the Punisher. Very few villains have managed to defeat the scourge of the underworld, but Wolverine's demon Seed managed it by decapitation. The two would clash again in Tokyo when the Punisher returned from the dead as Frankencastle. His mind corrupted, the Punisher's battle with his mocking enemy caused widespread destruction. Since we're on the topic of decapitation, now would be a good time to mention the villain known as the Russian. The mercenary nicknamed the Russian accepted a job from crime boss Nucci to kill the Punisher. After a brutal fight, the Punisher smothered the Russian and later taunted Nucci by showing her the Russian's severed head. A secret paramilitary agency then resurrected the Russian, giving him an enhanced body with boosted senses, 3 hearts, and a toughened skeleton. It is no surprise that crime lords are high up on the Punisher's hit list, as our next villain Nikki Cavella found out the hard way. Nikki was born into a mafia family, and under his aunt's orders, he would kill his parents before framing his uncle Jimmy for the crime. Subsequently, he took over his father's operation, becoming a crime lord at a young age. Cavella proved to be too brutal even for the mafia and was exiled. However, after the Punisher crippled the Massimo crime family, Cavella was called upon to assassinate the Punisher. Eventually, the Punisher would punish his man by shooting him in the stomach within a forest, where he endured 3 days of agony before succumbing to his wounds. Although we have mentioned a plethora of villains, no Punisher Rogues Gallery would be complete without our next character. Initially a handsome mafia hitman nicknamed the Butte, Billy Russo became both physically and mentally scarred when he was thrown through a window by the Punisher. With his shredded face stitched together, Russo adopted a less complimentary alias in Jigsaw. Now obsessed with extracting revenge on the Punisher, Jigsaw would go to extreme lengths to achieve his goal, including masquerading as the Vigilante when the Punisher faked his own death. Why might he purport as his most hated antagonist, I hear you ask? Simple: to punish the criminals responsible for killing the Punisher and robbing him of the pleasure of assassinating the Vigilante. And with the final piece of the puzzle in place, we can exit the Rogues Gallery. Please mention which other superheroes you would like to see me cover for future uploads, and I will try to be quicker in bringing you the videos. Please remember to like and subscribe if you'd like to subscribe, and I will see you again in the next Rogues Gallery.